I am a 36-year-old man, and I have been married to my wife, Lisa, who is 34 years old, for 7 years. We do not have children, which was something we both agreed on early in the relationship. At least, I thought we were on the same page about that and everything else. Lisa has always had a strong personality. Some might call her assertive, others might call her difficult. Honestly, it never bothered me much in the early years. She was passionate, driven, and had this magnetic energy that drew people to her. But over the past year or so, things began to change. It started with her job. Lisa works in marketing, and her hours had been getting crazier. She started coming home late, exhausted but on edge, snapping at me over the smallest things. I tried to be understanding, work stress, right? I would cook dinner, give her space, and tried to keep things running smoothly at home. But no matter what I did, it was never enough. Then came the taxi rides. Lisa does not drive, and public transport in our area is not great, so she started relying on a taxi service to get around. At first, it did not seem like a big deal. She told me it was convenient, and honestly, I did not give it much thought. But after a while, I noticed she was always taking rides with the same driver, a guy named Jake. She even mentioned him a few times, casually. "Oh, Jake was so funny today." Or, "Jake helped me carry my bags." I am not a jealous person by nature, so I brushed it off. She had always been sociable and chatty with people, so I figured she was just being friendly. Then the errands started. Lisa would tell me she needed to run out for something and would be gone for hours. When I asked where she went, her answers were vague. "Oh, just picked up a few things." Or, "Needed some fresh air." I also noticed she had become glued to her phone, laughing at messages she would never share with me. When I asked who she was texting, she would roll her eyes and say, "Just work stuff, babe. Do not be nosy." The fights got worse. Lisa would blow up over nothing, accusing me of not supporting her or stifling her freedom. It felt like I was walking on eggshells every single day. I thought maybe she was just going through something and did not know how to communicate it. But the truth was far more painful than anything I could have imagined. The cracks in our marriage kept widening. Lisa's behavior became more erratic, and I was starting to feel like a stranger in my own home. Every time I tried to talk to her about how distant she had become, she would either shut me down or explode into a dramatic, over-the-top argument. "Why are you always on my case?" she yelled one night. "Can't I just have a life outside of this house?" I will admit, I started to wonder if I was the problem. Was I being too needy or controlling? But deep down, something felt wrong. My gut told me there was more to Lisa's late nights and vague explanations than just work stress or errands. One Friday evening, she came home hours after she said she would, smelling faintly of cologne that was definitely not mine. When I asked her where she had been, she waved me off with a dismissive laugh. "Oh, stop being paranoid," she said. "I was out with some coworkers. You know how it is." But I did not know how it was, and she did not offer any details. The following week, I decided to test her. I casually asked if I could join her for one of her so-called errands. The suggestion made her visibly uncomfortable. She hesitated for a moment before snapping. "What, you do not trust me now? I do not need you tagging along like some watchdog. I can handle myself." Her reaction was all the confirmation I needed that something was going on. At this point, Jake the taxi driver was a name I could not ignore. Lisa mentioned him too often for my comfort, and I started paying attention to the patterns. Every time she claimed to be running an errand or working late, it coincided with one of her taxi rides. Out of curiosity, I looked at our shared bank account. Sure enough, there were frequent charges to the same taxi service. Some of the trips were expensive, far more than a quick ride to the store should have cost. When I brought it up, Lisa brushed it off. "You know how gas prices are these days," she said with a smirk, as though that was the end of the conversation. But it was not the end for me. My suspicion turned into full-blown paranoia. I started noticing other little things. A new set of lingerie stuffed in the back of her drawer, a second phone charger she claimed she bought, just in case, and the way she started dressing up more for her supposed errands than she ever did for our date nights. One evening, while she was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the counter. I am not proud of what I did next, but I could not stop myself. I unlocked her phone, she had not changed the passcode, and scrolled through her messages. Most of them seemed normal, work chats, messages from friends. But then I saw a thread with a contact saved as J. My heart sank. The messages were flirty, full of winking emojis and inside jokes. Jake. It had to be Jake. The most recent message from him read, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. Same spot?" I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. I put the phone down just as Lisa stepped out of the shower, her towel wrapped around her. "What are you doing with my phone?" she asked sharply, her eyes narrowing. I lied. I said it had buzzed, and I was just checking to see if it was an emergency. She snatched it out of my hand, muttering about privacy and boundaries. That night I barely slept. I knew I could not confront her without proof, but I also could not ignore what I had seen. The woman I had loved and trusted for 7 years was hiding something, and I was determined to find out what it was. After seeing the messages between Lisa and Jake, I felt like I was living in a nightmare. The woman who used to confide in me about everything now had secrets I was determined to uncover. The next day, Lisa told me she had another errand to run after work. My stomach churned as I watched her leave, dressed in a way that screamed she was not just heading to the grocery store. Tight jeans, a low-cut top, and a touch of perfume I had not smelled on her in years. I had made up my mind, I was going to follow her. After giving her a head start, I got in my car and drove a few streets over to wait. Sure enough, I spotted the familiar yellow taxi pull up to our house. Lisa climbed in, laughing as she leaned toward the driver. Jake, I assumed. I followed them at a safe distance, my heart racing as I tried to stay out of sight. They drove to a nearby park, one Lisa and I had visited a few times during the early days of our marriage. It was quiet, tucked away, and had a secluded parking lot. I parked my car far enough away to avoid detection and watched as they got out of the taxi. Lisa was smiling, her body language completely different from how she acted around me lately. Jake, a guy in his late 30s with a cocky grin and a casual swagger, opened the trunk of his car. To my shock, he pulled out a picnic basket. They walked to a grassy area under a large oak tree, spread out a blanket, and sat closer than coworkers or casual acquaintances should. My stomach churned as I watched Lisa laugh at something he said, leaning into him as though he was the center of her world. I stayed in my car, torn between storming over there and keeping my distance. If I confronted her now, she would deny everything and probably twist the story to make me look crazy. No, I needed more proof. The next step in my plan came that evening. After Lisa returned home, smiling in a way she had not smiled around me in months, I decided to hire a private investigator. It was not a cheap decision, but I needed undeniable evidence. Over the next week, the investigator confirmed what I had already suspected. Lisa and Jake were meeting regularly, and not just for innocent picnics. There were dinners, late-night drives, and even visits to motels. One night, the investigator handed me a folder full of photos and detailed notes. Seeing those images of Lisa with Jake, holding hands, kissing, disappearing into a motel room together, was like a dagger to my heart. I wanted to confront her right then and there, but I held back. I needed to wait for the right moment, the moment when she could not wriggle out of it with lies and excuses. But the truth was already eating away at me. Every time she came home late with some flimsy excuse, I felt my anger and resentment grow. I was living with a stranger, a woman who could lie to my face without a second thought. The worst part? She still acted like I was the problem. Every little thing I did annoyed her, how I loaded the dishwasher, the way I folded the laundry, even the shows I watched on TV. She had become a master at picking fights over nothing, and I realized it was her way of deflecting guilt. I stayed quiet, playing the clueless husband, but inside, I was preparing for the inevitable showdown. I was not going to let her get away with this. The day I caught Lisa red-handed will forever be burned into my memory. It started like any other day, with her acting distant and irritable, snapping at me for leaving my coffee mug on the counter. She mentioned she had meetings all afternoon and would be late coming home. By now, these excuses were as predictable as the sunrise. I had already spoken to the private investigator that morning. He informed me that Jake's taxi had been spotted in the usual area, a nearby parking lot where they often met. Armed with this information and the photos from earlier, I decided it was time to end this charade. Lisa left around lunchtime, dressed far too provocatively for any meeting. I waited 10 minutes before grabbing my car keys and heading out. My heart was pounding as I drove to the parking lot, every mile feeling like an eternity. When I arrived, I parked at a distance and scanned the area. Sure enough, there it was, Jake's taxi, tucked away in a secluded corner. I crept closer on foot, staying out of sight. My hands were trembling, but I kept going, determined to finally expose her lies. As I approached the taxi, I could see movement inside. The windows were slightly fogged, but the scene was unmistakable. Lisa and Jake were in the back seat, tangled together, their clothes in disarray. Her laughter echoed from the car, carefree and mocking, as though she had no idea the life she was destroying. I stood there for a moment, frozen in shock and rage. My wife, was having sex with a stranger in a parked taxi like it was nothing. Before I could stop myself, I slammed my hand against the window, the sound like a gunshot in the silence. Both of them jumped, scrambling to cover themselves. Lisa's face went from shock to fury in an instant. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she screamed as she fumbled to pull her shirt back on. "What is wrong with me?" I shot back, my voice shaking. "What the hell is wrong with you, Lisa? Do you even realize what you've done?" Jake, to his credit, had the decency to look guilty, but Lisa was a different story. She stepped out of the car, her hair a mess and her eyes blazing with anger. "You are unbelievable," she spat. "Following me around like some psycho? Do you hear yourself? You are pathetic." Pathetic. She called me pathetic. I could feel my blood boiling as I held up the folder of photos the private investigator had given me. "I know everything, Lisa. I know about the dinners, the motels, all of it. Do not you dare try to spin this around on me." She glanced at the folder, her expression faltering for just a second before the hysteria kicked in. "So what if I was? Maybe if you were not so boring and predictable, I would not have needed to find someone who actually makes me feel alive." Jake muttered something about not wanting any trouble and quickly got back in his car, driving off and leaving Lisa standing there in her disheveled state. "I cannot believe you!" she screamed again. "You have been spying on me? Invading my privacy? What kind of husband does that?" "The kind who does not deserve to be lied to and cheated on," I replied coldly. For once, Lisa had no snappy comeback. She stood there, her face a mix of rage and embarrassment. Finally, she hissed, "You are going to regret this," and stormed off down the street, leaving me standing there with a shattered heart and a clear decision. That was it. The marriage was over. I went home, packed a bag, and left for a friend's house. The divorce papers would come next. I knew Lisa would not make it easy, but I was done playing the fool. After catching Lisa in the act, I felt a mix of anger, heartbreak, and strange relief. The mask had finally fallen, and there was no denying who she had become, or maybe who she always was. I spent that night at my friend Mark's place, venting over beers while he shook his head in disbelief. "You deserve better, man," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "You've put up with her crap for too long. Get a lawyer and end it." The next morning, I woke up feeling strangely clear-headed. It was time to take control of my life again. I called a divorce lawyer that afternoon and explained the situation. The lawyer, a sharp and empathetic woman named Clara, listened patiently as I spilled everything: Lisa's lies, her affair, the folder of evidence. Clara assured me that the photos and notes from the private investigator would be invaluable during the proceedings. She's not going to take this lying down, Clara warned. But with what you've got, you're in a strong position. Let's start the process. Filing for divorce felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. But I knew Lisa was not going to make it easy. She was manipulative and loved drama, and I braced myself for whatever chaos she was about to unleash. Sure enough, when I returned to the house a few days later to collect more of my things, Lisa was waiting for me. She must have figured out what was coming because she was pacing the living room, her face red and twisted in anger. You think you can just walk away and ruin my life? She snapped as soon as I walked through the door. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? I laughed bitterly. You mean by sleeping with Jake? Yeah, I think filing for divorce is a pretty reasonable response. She rolled her eyes, switching tactics in an instant. It was just a fling, okay? It didn't mean anything. Are you seriously going to throw away our marriage over one little mistake? One little mistake? I said, my voice rising. Lisa, you've been lying to me for months. This wasn't a mistake, it was a choice. Over and over again, you chose to betray me. Her face crumpled into fake tears. You're just going to abandon me like this? What am I supposed to do? Figure it out, I said coldly. I'm done. But of course, Lisa was not done. Over the next few weeks, she pulled every trick in the book to make my life hell. She called me constantly, alternating between tearful apologies and furious accusations. She told mutual friends that I was controlling and emotionally abusive, hoping to turn them against me. The worst was when she started showing up unannounced at my temporary place, demanding that I fix things and be a man. Why are you doing this to me? She screamed one night, pounding on Mark's door. You're the one ruining everything. I refused to engage, letting Mark handle her until she stormed off in a rage. Despite her theatrics, I stayed firm. Clara helped me push the divorce through as quickly as possible. Lisa's attempts to stall were laughable. She tried claiming that the photos were fake and that the private investigator was biased. When those tactics failed, she tried to negotiate, saying she would make it worth my while if I reconsidered. But there was nothing she could offer that would undo the damage she had done. The divorce was officially underway, and I started to see a light at the end of the tunnel. But I knew Lisa well enough to realize she was not finished with her schemes. And as it turned out, she had one more card up her sleeve, one I never saw coming. As the divorce proceedings dragged on, Lisa's antics became more outrageous. At first, it was just the constant calls and the dramatic appearances. Then she started playing dirty. One morning, I received a notification from my bank. Lisa had drained a joint savings account we had barely used over the years. I was furious. I called her immediately, and she answered with her signature smug tone. Oh, that account? She said, feigning innocence. I thought it was mine to use. You know, since I'm the one who needs support now that you're throwing me away. You can't just take all the money, Lisa. That's theft, I snapped. Oh, grow up, she said, her voice dripping with disdain. You're not going to miss it. Besides, you'll get over it like you're getting over this marriage. I contacted Clara immediately, and she reassured me that the money would be addressed during the settlement. But Lisa's behavior didn't stop there. A week later, I came home to find my car key from bumper to bumper, the words, liar, scratched into the driver's side door. While I couldn't prove it was Lisa, I had no doubt it was her handiwork. This was exactly her style, a blend of petty and vindictive. Then came the social media posts. Lisa started airing our dirty laundry online, painting herself as the victim of an ungrateful and controlling husband. She accused me of neglecting her, making her feel unloved, and even claimed I had cheated on her first. It was like she had created an alternate reality where she was the wrong party, and I was the villain. Some people bought into it, messaging me to ask if the rumors were true. Others, who knew her better, reached out to offer support, telling me they'd seen through her lies. But the final straw came when Lisa escalated from lies to outright sabotage. One evening, Mark and I were at his place when the doorbell rang. Mark answered it, and there stood 2 police officers. They told me Lisa had filed a report claiming I had physically threatened her. I was stunned. "That's a lie," I said immediately. "I've never laid a hand on her. We're just here to follow up," one of the officers said, clearly skeptical of the accusation. They asked me a few questions, and after hearing my side of the story, they left without taking any action. But the damage was done. "She's trying to ruin you," Mark said after the officers left. "You need to be careful. She's dangerous when she's desperate." I knew he was right. Lisa wasn't just trying to hurt me, she was trying to destroy my reputation, my finances, and my peace of mind. But I also knew something she didn't. Clara had been gathering evidence of all her stunts. The photos, the drained bank account, the social media slander, and now the false police report, all of it was being documented. I was angry, but I was also determined. Lisa might think she was untouchable, but her actions were digging her own grave. The divorce proceedings were nearing their conclusion, and with Clara's guidance, I was prepared for whatever Lisa threw at me next. But even with everything she had already done, I wasn't ready for the next bombshell. Lisa had one final, twisted plan, and it would change everything. Just when I thought Lisa had run out of ways to complicate things, she pulled a move so audacious, so calculated, that it left me speechless. One morning, I woke up to a text from her. It was a single, chilling sentence. "We need to talk. I'm pregnant." I stared at the message, my mind racing. Pregnant? There was no way. Lisa and I had not been intimate in months, long before her affair with Jake began. My gut told me it was another one of her lies, but the weight of the accusation was enough to make my heart pound. I called her immediately. "What the hell are you talking about, Lisa? We haven't even—" "I knew you'd say that," she interrupted, her voice teetering between triumph and mock hurt. "But it's true. I'm pregnant and it's yours. You don't get to walk away from this marriage now." I couldn't believe the audacity. "You expect me to believe that? You've been sleeping with someone else, Lisa. How do I know it's not Jake's kid?" Her voice turned shrill. "Are you seriously accusing me of lying about a baby? You're disgusting, you know that? I don't care what you think. The truth will come out soon enough." I hung up, furious and conflicted. There was no way I was going to let her manipulate me into staying, but this accusation needed to be dealt with carefully. If she really was pregnant, I needed to know whose child it was. Clara was my first call. I explained the situation, and she immediately saw through Lisa's ploy. "She's trying to use this as leverage," Clara said. "If she's lying, it's a desperate attempt to control the narrative. If she's not, we'll demand a paternity test. Don't let her intimidate you." Over the next few weeks, Lisa doubled down on her story. She started telling mutual friends about her supposed pregnancy, spinning it as the reason I had abandoned her. She even posted a blurry photo of what looked like a positive pregnancy test on social media, captioned, "Miracles happen when you least expect them." But the cracks in her story were obvious. She refused to see a doctor, claiming she was too stressed. When I insisted on attending an appointment with her, she dodged, saying it was too soon for me to be involved. It all came to a head when I served her with an official demand for a paternity test. Clara had included language in the divorce proceedings stating that any claims of pregnancy would require medical verification and testing. Lisa exploded. She called me, screaming that I was humiliating her and accusing me of not trusting her. When I calmly reminded her that trust was earned, not blindly given, she hung up on me. A week later, the truth finally came out. Lisa's own lies caught up with her. Mark sent me a screenshot of a mutual acquaintance's message, revealing that Lisa had confessed during a drunken night out that she had faked the whole pregnancy to keep me in line. When I confronted her about it, she didn't even try to deny it. "What else was I supposed to do?" she snapped. "You were acting like such an asshole, leaving me with nothing. I had to try something." "That's it, Lisa," I said, my voice as cold as I could make it. "You've crossed every line. When this divorce is finalized, I don't ever want to hear from you again." Her face twisted with fury, but for once she had no comeback. The false pregnancy stunt might have been her most elaborate scheme yet, but it was also the final nail in the coffin of any lingering doubts I had. I was more determined than ever to end this nightmare of a marriage and reclaim my life. By the time we reached the final stages of the divorce proceedings, Lisa's antics had only solidified my resolve. Clara had built a rock-solid case against her, leveraging the mountain of evidence I had accumulated: the affair, the drained bank account, the social media slander, and now the false pregnancy claim. Lisa, however, did not go down without a fight. At the court hearing, she showed up in her finest, wronged woman outfit, a black dress, perfectly styled hair, and an exaggerated air of sorrow. Her theatrics were in full force. She started by playing the victim, accusing me of being cold and neglectful, and claiming that her affair was the result of my emotional abuse. It was almost impressive how convincingly she could spin her web of lies. But Clara was ready. When it was our turn, Clara presented the evidence methodically, dismantling Lisa's claims piece by piece. The photos of her and Jake, the private investigator's notes, and screenshots of her social media posts painted a clear picture of who Lisa really was. The piece de resistance came when Clara brought up the false pregnancy claim. "Your Honor," Clara said, holding up the demand for a paternity test, "the respondent claimed to be pregnant and refused to provide medical verification. Subsequently, she admitted to fabricating the pregnancy to manipulate my client." Lisa's face turned red as the judge looked at her over their glasses. "Is this true, Mrs. Daniels?" Lisa stammered. Well, it was. He pushed me to it." The judge was not amused. "So, you admit to lying about a pregnancy in an attempt to gain leverage in these proceedings?" "I was desperate," Lisa finally snapped, her polished facade cracking. From that moment, the tide turned decisively in my favor. The judge awarded me the majority of the assets, including the house. Lisa was ordered to repay the money she had taken from our joint account, and her request for spousal support was denied outright. After the hearing, Lisa stormed out of the courtroom, fuming. She shot me a venomous glare as I walked past her. "You'll regret this, you know," she hissed. "You'll miss me when you're alone." I did not bother responding. The relief I felt when the judge finalized the divorce was indescribable. It was like stepping out of a storm into calm, clear skies. For the first time in months, I could breathe again. But just as I began to move on with my life, Lisa decided to give me one last parting gift, an unexpected twist I never saw coming. I thought I was finally free. The divorce was finalized, the house was mine, and Lisa was out of my life. Or so I believed. For a couple of weeks, things felt normal again. I started rebuilding my routine, reconnecting with friends, and even entertaining the idea of dating someday. But then came the letter. It was a thick envelope, stamped with a legal firm's insignia. My stomach sank as I opened it and began reading. Lisa had filed a defamation lawsuit against me. She claimed that my actions during and after the divorce, particularly hiring a private investigator and sharing the evidence with mutual friends, had damaged her reputation and caused her emotional distress. I could not believe it. The sheer audacity of this woman was beyond anything I had ever imagined. She had been the one lying, cheating, stealing, and slandering me, yet now she was trying to make me out as the villain again. I immediately called Clara. She was incredulous but unsurprised. "This is a desperation move," she said. "She has no case, especially given the overwhelming evidence we already presented in court. Still, we'll take this seriously." The lawsuit, however baseless, dragged me back into the nightmare I thought I had escaped. Lisa's accusations were ludicrous. She claimed I had shared intimate details about her private life to ruin her standing in the community. In reality, all I had done was confide in close friends and use the evidence in court, which Clara assured me was completely legal. The case never even made it to trial. Clara filed a motion to dismiss, attaching a detailed rebuttal that dismantled every one of Lisa's claims. The judge agreed and threw the case out within weeks. But Lisa wasn't done. Around the same time, she began spreading rumors about me to anyone who would listen. She told people I had plotted the divorce to get rid of her, and even hinted that I had been abusive, a disgusting and baseless lie. I learned about this when a mutual acquaintance, Sarah, called me in concern. "She's going around saying all this stuff about you," Sarah said. "I don't believe her, but some people might. You should know what she's doing." I felt a mix of anger and exhaustion. Lisa couldn't win in court, so she was trying to ruin me socially instead. Rather than engaging with her nonsense, I decided to let the truth speak for itself. I shared my side of the story with those who asked but otherwise stayed quiet. Over time, most people saw through her lies, especially when some of her old friends started sharing stories of their own about Lisa's manipulative behavior. Despite her attempts to drag me down, I focused on moving forward. I blocked her number, ignored her online posts, and made a conscious effort to leave her toxicity in the past. But Lisa wasn't quite done with her games. She had one final, dramatic act left in her arsenal, one that would bring everything to an explosive conclusion. Lisa's last stunt was the one that took me completely by surprise. After everything, her affair, the lies, the manipulation, I thought I had seen the worst of it. But I was wrong. It all started on a Friday night. I had just finished a long week of work and was planning to relax at home, enjoying some peace and quiet. I poured myself a drink and sat on the couch when my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. My gut told me it was Lisa, but I couldn't have anticipated what would come next. "You should come to the old house. It's important." I stared at the message for a few seconds, unsure if I should even respond. It had been weeks since the divorce, and Lisa was no longer part of my life. At least, that's what I thought. But something about the message nagged at me. Against my better judgment, I replied, "What do you want?" The response came almost immediately. "I'm sorry for everything. I just need to talk to you. Please." I knew I should ignore it. I knew I shouldn't go back to that place, where everything fell apart. But the nagging curiosity, and maybe a small sliver of hope that she was finally going to come clean, pushed me to grab my keys. When I arrived at the house, it was dark, and the door was ajar, just slightly. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the door handle, but I pushed it open. The sight that greeted me almost knocked the breath from my lungs. Lisa was standing in the living room, dressed in the same way she had when we first met, beautiful, alluring, but twisted by the desperate aura that surrounded her now. She looked almost innocent, as if nothing had ever happened between us. But the moment I stepped inside, I heard a sound that froze me in place. It was the softest laugh, a male voice. My stomach churned. I turned to the side, and there he was, Jake, sitting casually on the couch, his smirk unmistakable. "Surprise," Lisa said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. I stared at them both, the pieces falling into place. They had orchestrated this sick game of trying to manipulate me back into their world, making me believe that maybe she had changed. "What the hell is this, Lisa?" I asked, my voice cold and steady. "Oh, don't act like you're above this," she said, her tone now sharp. "We both know you're still obsessed with me. You're just too proud to admit it." Jake chuckled from the couch, clearly enjoying the spectacle. "Yeah, man, she's right. You've been crawling back ever since we caught you snooping around in that parking lot." My blood boiled. I could feel my face flush with fury, but I kept myself under control. "You think I came here for you?" I spat. "You really think after everything I'd want you back?" Lisa's smile faltered for a second, but she quickly recovered, stepping closer. "You'll regret this, you know. You'll always remember me. We had something, didn't we?" "No," I replied, my voice unwavering. "What we had was a lie, Lisa. And I'm done living in your world of manipulation and deceit." I turned on my heel and walked out without another word, my pulse pounding in my ears. As I stepped into my car, the weight of everything that had happened settled on my shoulders. Lisa's last desperate attempt to pull me back into her orbit had failed. I could see the truth more clearly than ever: she was never going to change. The drive back home was long and quiet. For the first time in a while, I felt calm. The divorce was behind me, the chaos finally at an end. I knew I was done with her, completely, utterly done. And as I pulled into my driveway, I realized that this was the final chapter. Lisa had tried everything, but in the end, she couldn't break me. For the first time in months, I felt free.